it's kind of gotten a little bit sad in the last little bit, and I hate to add to that, but this is, it's longer than a poem, but it's shorter than a short story, so it's kind of a blurb. But I wrote it out of heartbreak. And my mom said to me as I lay in her lap with my heart so broken it felt like I couldn't breathe, she said, "Honey, a guy who doesn't believe in love is all you believe in." I love my mom. And so this is an imaginary conversation that I wrote with him. It's called Do You Love Her? Do you love her? I asked. I looked down at my hands, suddenly more self-aware than ever. There was a pause. Yes, he answered, his voice gentle but unwavering. So much, more than anything. Defeated, I smiled a sad smile and looked up and met his gaze. You know, I always fantasized about being the one to change your mind. I always dreamt I'd be the one who made you believe in love. He was quiet and he just looked at me, not with pity or with anger or hatred or annoyance, not even distinctly with kindness, and certainly not with love. Promise me something, I pleaded earnestly, my eyes heavy and my heart heavier. Promise me one thing and then I'll let you go. His gaze turned expectant, not quite apprehensive, but cautious. Promise me you will tell her you love her every day. Tell her first thing in the morning when you, bleary-eyed, look across at her, when her hair nearly eclipses her face and a silent morning song escapes her lips. Tell her over breakfast, between sips of coffee and juice, when she doesn't notice you staring at her as she gazes out the kitchen window. Tell her over the phone when she's running late and so are you, but neither of you want to be the one who hangs up first, so you just smile, and you can tell she's smiling too just by the way the sound of her breathing changes. Tell her over text, because you're not technically supposed to have your cell phone out, but no one actually cares. When you have to type it without looking. When you have to type it without looking and you hope you've practiced it enough to get it right. Tell her when your face is buried in her hair, as she stands on her tiptoes and her body is flush against yours, when all of your worries fade to distant whispers compared to the symphony that is the mere sound of her voice. Tell her as you undress her, as your lips create constellations on her skin, when your bodies are flushed and warm and you can almost hear the thundering rhythm of her heartbeat. Tell her as your bodies embrace, all sweat and lips and hands and breath, when your fingertips send goosebumps up her spine and your head is between her thighs. Tell her as you are falling back to earth, clinging to one another, when your lungs feel like they're struggling to find oxygen, but at the same time your head feels dizzy and weightless. Tell her when it's quiet and you're just holding her. When your heartbeat seems to fall into stride beside hers, and for a moment the only thing your senses know are the sound of her, the sight of her, the taste of her, the scent of her, the feeling of her. Tell her as she sleeps, when her breaths are deep and even, and you don't think she can even hear it, but you tell her anyway, in a voice so gentle and so quiet it's barely above a whisper. Promise me you will do that, and promise me you will wake up and do it all over again. His gaze traveled down to my hands that I still didn't quite know what to do with, so they just held each other, kind of like the way I always imagined they would hold his, if only he'd let them. He was quiet for a long moment. I promise. All I could do was nod and bow my head as I turned to go. And thank you. His words were unexpected and they stopped me in my tracks. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have ever believed I was capable of being loved. So thank you. I didn't trust myself enough to look at him again, his voice so gentle and sincere. I didn't need to look at him. I knew his hands were in his pockets and he was leaning to one side as he absent-mindedly worried the inside of his cheek. I knew his head was tilted, just slightly, and just as it always did when he looked at me, studied me. Gone were the lines that appeared by his eyes when he smiled that breathtaking smile. Gone were the way they shone, dazzling, mischievous, and so incredibly blue in the dim light of a small bedside lamp. Gone were the silly sounds he made and the quirky voices he spoke in that made me laugh. Instead, his lungs simply drew in breath after measured breath, and in the place of words, his voice spoke silence. He spoke the kind of silence that sounds the way the air around a firework feels the moment after it explodes. Empty and smothering. I nodded almost imperceptibly, and then I walked.